And coming up on this week's Green Signals, heritage railways face an existential threat as autumn budget tax changes will cost some lines more than £200,000 a year. Heidi Alexander becomes the new Transport Secretary following the shock resignation of Louise Haigh. The bill to nationalise Britain's railways receives the Royal Assent. And Richard finds out more about Britain's latest open access operator, Go-Up. So welcome to this week's Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, in a very damp, dreich Lincolnshire, and
from me, Richard Bowker, in an equally damp and dreich wherever, Wiltshire. There you go.
At least I know where I am.
Yeah, well, I know.
Just. Well, we start this week with a really worrying story for the whole of the heritage railway sector, as the full implications of October's autumn budget start to be revealed. The devastating effect of national insurance and national living wage increases are becoming painfully clear, and I do mean painfully. So, just remind us briefly, Richard, as our numbers guy, what Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced would change from April 2025.
Yep, so pretty straightforward, really. Employer national insurance contributions are going to rise to 15%. That's up 1.2 percentage points from 13.8. And the threshold per employee for paying those contributions has gone down from £9,000 to £5,000 a year. So you start paying it earlier than you were going
big to. Big jump, that, isn't it?
Previously, big jump. Now, there's second point. The Chancellor also increased national living wage by 6.7% to £12.21. That was up from £11.44 for the over 21s. And it was actually a 16.3% increase for 18 to 20-year-olds, from £10 up to £11.40. So big jumps.
So big jumps indeed. So we decided to speak to Ffestiniog and Welsh Highland Railway General Manager and Deputy Chair of the Heritage Railway Association, Paul Lewin, to find out what all this means for a sector which is already, in many ways, teetering on the brink.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined on Green Signals by Paul Lewin, who is the Director and General Manager of the Ffestiniog and Welsh Highland Railways, and also currently the Acting Chair of the Heritage Railway Association. Welcome to Green Signals, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
I wonder if we just start with your day job, which is the Ffestiniog and Welsh Highland Railway. You've come to the end of a season. How's 2024 gone? Has it been a good one? One with challenges? How do you sort of sum it up?
Oh, well, it's been good in many ways. I think when people ask that question of Heritage Railway, people have different views in their mind. Some people may be wondering about how well the engines have done. Others will be thinking, what projects have you dealt with? And others will be thinking, what about the business? And I think pretty much from every perspective, we've done well. We've had some good projects. Our lottery-funded project has been doing well at Boston Lodge. We've done well with training volunteers and a lot of investment in upskilling volunteers, so we're feeling the benefit of that. So that side of things is pretty good. Support, members and rolling stock, locos, all those things, all going great guns. The downside for us this year is it's been a difficult year for tourism in North Wales. And so our income isn't quite what we'd hoped for, but it's not bad. We're okay, but just we won't be having any end-of-year parties, I don't think, particularly this year. And I think we've probably done better than most. So I think we remain in a pretty strong position, actually. Yeah.
That's good to hear, though I suspect that one of the things that will have killed off any chance of an end-of-year party, I suppose, was the news in the budget that national insurance contributions were going up to 15%, and also the national minimum wage levels were going up in some cases by a significant percentage. What impact has that had on you, but I suppose with your Heritage Railway Association hat on, what impact has that had across all the heritage railways in the country?
Well, I think there's a lot of railways that will be sitting down trying to formulate a budget for next year at this time. A lot of us have end of year that are either end of December or end of January. And trying to think how things can work for next year is looking particularly difficult. I can use the Ffestiniog and Welsh Highland as an example just to get things started, but I'd have to qualify what I have to say, and indeed I will. So it starts off with looking at our figures, and in a typical year, a railway like us with a turnover of £6 or £7 million, the surplus that we make, you could hardly call it profit, the surplus we make, maybe just a couple of 100,000. And we fight really hard to be able to make that much. We're not in a position where we can afford to make a loss. We're a charity. We can't make a loss. So we have to cut a cloth very carefully. Now, what's happened is in the Labour government's budget last month, we have been dealt a severe blow in that the extra cost of NI and the cost of minimum wage increments will cost us about £200,000. So in a normal year, it will wipe out any surplus or profit. You could hardly call it profit, but any surplus will be gone. And that's quite a difficult thing to live with. Of course, in a difficult year, and I said this year's training's been difficult. If we had another year like this year, next year, then we'd be in a loss-making situation.
And since you can't be in a loss-making situation for the reasons you said, you're a charity, presumably the only answer to that in the short term is to shed jobs, get rid of people to cut that cloth accordingly.
Yeah, so the way businesses deal with these things is they look at how they can increase their margins. So it may be that you can have different products, charge more, get a larger margin, and look carefully to cut costs. And of course, people costs are a big part of that. So I think we should look at that in two ways. One is the cost generally, and then we should come back to the people bit with a slightly longer term view on that. So if I look at costs, pretty much everything that Heritage Railways buy in any great volume is increasing in cost well ahead of inflation. So the biggest cost for a Heritage Railway is typically fuel. And we've seen that coal has doubled and tripled in price in recent years. So that's a tough one to live with. But so has the cost of electricity, gas, water. We were looking at water bills the other day, eye-watering amounts in there. So at every twist and turn, steel is another one. Railways use a lot of steel. The prices are really climbing. And so that really hurts. When it comes to looking at your margins, most heritage railways will be making some money out of running trains. Some do, some don't, but it's that's the core of their business. But then there'll be things around the edges, such as catering and retail. And, look down any high street and you can see that retail is in a bad way. It's having a difficult time. So pinning your hopes on stronger retail spend would be a foolhardy thing to do, in my opinion. Similarly with catering, a lot of railways have pubs or catering establishments, and again, you look down the high street and pubs are closing. Every week you hear of a few more pubs that are closed. So that's a business area that's not so likely to be generating any extra income. So I think what will be happening with that is that railways will have to cast around to find different income streams, different ways of earning money. And that's really easy to say and really quite difficult to do, because most people who are involved with the railway do it because they want to be involved with the trains, operating trains, and all associated with that.
And you'd like to think, Paul, that if those income streams were there, kind of somebody would have kind of thought to go and exploit them already. But let's just, I mean, this is a worry, because without over complimenting you, that the Ffestiniog and the Welsh Highland Railway is right at the top of the tree in terms of not only size, but also the commercial professionalism and all the rest of it that comes with running a business. in the heritage sector. That's not going to be the same for all of them. And quite a few of these heritage railways were probably marginal before the recent budget change. Could we be looking, and I suppose this is with your Heritage Railway Association hat on, I mean, could we be looking at an existential threat to some of these now?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I think if you look at what the Ffestiniog and Welsh Highland have done, you're saying very kind words about us, but we get criticised quite a lot by our own members and supporters because we're trying to run a different business model and do things in a different way. And for someone who's been involved with the Heritage Railway for 45 years or so, I absolutely understand where that is coming from because we all feel that pain. But equally, we can see that we have to do something. Now, if I look at other heritage railways whose support and membership is built up of more people who have got, shall we say, views that they'd like to keep things as they were, then they've got a bigger problem, because it's going to be harder for them to make the changes. Well, the changes that we've made and the more changes that are inevitably going to come as we're trying to find ways to make it all make sense.
How's the lobbying going? Because I know your president is a member of the House of Lords. He's been very active. He's very energetic. Is there any chance of convincing the government, the Treasury, to rethink this for heritage railways? Because if we're not careful, we're going to, this could be a real nasty unintended consequence.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. And I think what we get is that we do get support from government where it is possible. But we were mentioning earlier, for example, the issue of minimum wage, which has a big effect on us. And I should say a little more about that. But that, it's hard to imagine going to Parliament and saying, look, can you make an exemption to the minimum wage rules for heritage railways? That's just not going to happen. So I think an important part of the lobbying is knowing what it's sensible to ask, what's reasonable to ask and where you might get help. And I think that the Heritage Railway Association, through our CEO and our president, are quite well tuned into what the right things are to ask for.
Yeah, well, look, it makes perfect sense, but it's not a great outlook, isn't it? Unless something sort of fairly material changes across the board.
Yeah.
Look, I wonder if just to close, I wonder if I could ask you just a quick question about one of the things you mentioned there, which was fuel, which is going to sound slightly parochial, but actually is a much bigger issue. I know. Recently, you guys, the Welsh Highland Railway, was in the press because some residents in Carnarvon were very unhappy with what they described as acrid smoke drifting up from the station, which I think is quite a long ways, about 20 feet, isn't it, below a particular road. And they felt it was drifting into their homes and causing issues. And the problem, as I understand it, was, because the Welsh coal that we used to burn, we can't get anymore.
Yeah.
Is there a solution for the good residents of Carnarvon, but is there now a wider issue for the industry in terms of where on earth we're going to get decent quality coal in the future?
Yeah, this is an interesting situation in that all the effort that needs to go into finding a solution for steam locomotives now falls firmly and squarely on the shoulders of heritage railways. And heritage railways that don't have the resources to go out and find ways to solve the problem. So if you want to find new fuels and different ways of doing it, that's going to cost a lot of money and needs a lot of technical knowledge to be able to come up with a replacement fuel for coal. That's really quite a tough ask. And so we are trying to do that. And we have to remember that this happened to us at reasonably short notice. We were told that the Welsh coal supply would no longer be available to us. So we've been trying to find alternatives. And of course, you have to try these alternatives. And this is where it gets rather problematic in that you have to try these things. You have to gain a really good understanding of the fuel and how it works and so on, and how to use it in your steam loco. And when you try and explain the challenges to the public at large, coal is coal is coal, isn't it? Or maybe you've got some dirty coal. I heard that sort of mentioned. What they don't know what that means. Yeah, they just think I can see some smoke. Whereas of course it involves the kind of coal, the setup of the locos and how it's burning it, and vitally importantly, the skill of the fireman.
Yeah.
And a good fireman, and some of our best ones are fantastic, I have to say, can work with really difficult coal if they're familiar with it, and get a good result and get a fair chance of having the clean chimneys in the right places. We've got volunteer loco crews who are very skilled, but when something changes, they've all got to relearn. Now, I've got 150 loco crew, and so we make a change. We start learning with one or two of those crews. We just start getting that information out, and then we realise that, no, this isn't quite the right arrangement. We'll go on to the next one. And so as we're doing the testing, we're testing with different crews and different fuels, and the combinations are all a bit, there's so many variations on the arrangements we've got there. So where we will get to, I'm sure, is when we find the right fuel, and then we've managed to roll it out to all of the crews. They'll get to know. They all talk to each other, learn off each other, get better at it. So in the end, they'll find the techniques that work. But at the root of all this is trying to find the right fuel, and coal and oil are massively energy dense. So for any particular space, you've got a massive amount of energy in there compared to any other fuel. So, you need 10 or 10, 20, 30 times the volume of timber to get the same energy as you get out of coal, So, whereas people are searching, we're already seeing issues where alternative fuels, we've been offered some, but goodness me, do you need a lot of it in order to make your locomotives work? And we're just not set up for that. And it's big structural change, big costs involved in that change, and we're not yet certain we've found the right fuel that it's worth making huge changes for. So, very, very delicate situation, I must say.
No, it sounds like it, and it's all coming at possibly the worst possible moment in terms of structural cost changes elsewhere.
Well, I was just going to say one final thing. The final point is, don't be under any illusions, though, that the biggest single factor that will affect us is minimum wage. That's the thing that is biting into the budgets of heritage railways right across the country. It's the change in minimum wages, which it's not just the above inflation rises, it's things like having to pay holiday pay and sick pay, stuff which we all fundamentally agree with, but when it actually comes to paying it is costing us. And I also know that other heritage railways that rely more on volunteers, who may feel they're insulated from this, are actually finding that where they are is that often the average age of the volunteer is pretty old. And so the number of volunteers are going down, and it's inevitable that they will either employ people or shrink in size. And that's where the heritage railway movement is at the moment. He's trying to work out how to deal with that.
It does sound a pretty, I have to say, slightly gloomy outlook at the moment. The one thing I'm fairly confident of, that with the Heritage Railway Association, you're organised, you understand the issues, and you've got good advocates.
Yeah, and I think what we will see is that there is quite a degree of resilience in heritage railways and absolute determination. The determination that got railways built or preserved or restored, that spirit is still there. And so my hope is that what we'll see now is that people will start coming up with different ideas and different ways of earning income. And I think my message would be to everybody who's involved in the heritage railways is, if people are trying, get behind them and let them try, because it could be their efforts that bring the cash that makes your hobby and interest survive.
Well, that's not only a good positive point to end on, it's also a good sort of cry for, sort of a battle cry for mobilisation. So that sounds really really sensible and positive. Anyway, thank you for your time. Wish you all the very best. And we will be keeping in touch as this develops, no doubt. But for now, Paul Lewin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there you go, Richard. Our friends at Trackside Magazine have written about this in their latest issue, number 42, if you're interested. And if you want to read about how it's affecting some of the other railways, I saw in there, Richard, that the Kent and East Sussex Railway General Manager, Robin Coombs, said they've worked out this is going to cost them £45,000 a year. The West Somerset is saying 73,000, and that's before they add on the increases they'll need to make to employees earning more than the minimum wage to maintain salary differentials. It's a very scary time for some of these railways.
It certainly is, Nigel. And as Paul Lewin said there, for the Ffestiniog Welsh Highland, it's £200,000, which is their surplus. I mean, and which they use to then reinvest in the railway. So that's gone. And wasn't it incredible when I asked him, do you think that for some railways this is an existential threat? He said, absolutely. There's no messing around there. And these aren't train spotters playing trains. These are businesses that employ people. They're massively important to the local economies that they are based in. They're a huge part of the tourism sector. This is a very, very serious moment.
And, let's not forget that the Ffestiniog is not only one of our oldest railways, I think kicked off in 55, not long after the Talyllyn in 51, but in Paul Lewin, it's one of the best run and the biggest with big numbers. So if it will wipe out the Ffestiniog Welsh Highland surplus, then the other people are going to be in real trouble, aren't they?
Yeah.
So another one for us to keep our finger very firmly on the pulse of, Richard. Always good to listen to his Paul, though, isn't he?
Brilliant.
Right, let's move on to another big piece of political news this last week, and that's the appointment of a new Secretary of State for Transport following the shock resignation of Louise Haigh. We published a breaking news piece last week when her resignation was announced, which you can watch or listen to on our channels or to hear what we thought about that. But since then, Heidi Alexander has been appointed as her replacement, former Deputy Mayor of London, I think, Richard, isn't she? And I think the news has been met almost universally with approval.
It seems so, yeah. Now, I don't know Heidi Alexander. I can't comment from that point of view, but as you say, she was previously Deputy Mayor for Transport with Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. So she's got experience of transport, and that's always a positive. It's always a positive thing. Not every Secretary of State of Transport in the last however many years has come with that on their CV. Now, we do understand that officials at the department were shocked at the sort of speed, really, of the news and the resignation of Louise Haigh, but then actually very happy to see Heidi Alexander. And I guess that's probably because of her transport experience. They thought, somebody that will understand the brief. Now, there is one thing to bear in mind. Heidi Alexander is very much a southern-based MP. She's now the MP for Swindon, I think Swindon South, so actually not too far from me. And, of course, she was at Transport for London. Now, the Rail Minister, Peter Hendy, is also very much a London-based person because his main experience, he had a lot of experience, obviously, at Transport for London. Now, I know he's done Network Rail as well, but there's a London focus. So, Louise was a northern MP, and I suspect there'll be some going, need to make sure that this doesn't the axis doesn't move to being completely London-centric. But that's probably just one to watch, really.
Indeed. And I suppose we should mention the interview that she did this very morning, not long before we recorded this, on the Today programme at about 10 to 8 on the 4th of December, if anybody wants to listen to what I think was a real car crash, frankly. How it was depressing, full of, I don't know whether it was ideological BS or just a bad briefing, but I thought it was appalling, this constant refrain that for the last 30 years the private sector has presided over a disastrous railway that incidentally doubled its business and for which Labour were in charge. What do you think?
I thought it was awful. I was kind of bemused by it. It's almost as if, here are the 10 lines you've got to trot out. well, are they grounded in any reality? Oh, don't worry about that. Just this is what we believe, you know. So things like, for instance, I mean, she was asked, will nationalisation improve reliability? I am confident it will improve reliability, she said. Okay. And the interviewer pushed and said, well, you know, but some of these train companies, some of the worst performing train companies have been they're in the public sector. And she responded by saying, well, LNER have done very well, which was interesting because that just simply proved it's got nothing to do with whether you're in the public or private sector.
Exactly.
It's to do with the people you've got and the circumstances. But the bit I found absolutely unbelievable was then when pushed again on that, how are you confident it's going to get more reliable? She said, well, they won't be paying the management fee. And you kind of go, and what's that got to do with anything? I mean, and the answer, by the way, it's got nothing to do with anything. So, you know, Secretary of State, bringing railway companies back into the public sector, to public ownership, will of itself do absolutely nothing to improve reliability. It's not about ownership. It's about structure. It's about people. It's about empowerment. And it's about getting your officials out of the micromanagement of the day-to-day.
It's nothing to do with...
Please understand that.
It's nothing to do with who owns it. It's how it's run. The point you made there about the management fee, I was absolutely gobsmacked at. Her answer was, you know, we won't have to pay the management fee to TOCs anymore. Every penny that's available can be spent on the railways, can be put into improving passenger service rather than serving shareholders. Well, given that the TOCs are paid a sliver, 1%, 1.5%, it's tiny. So they won't be paying that. But somebody's got to, and that's going to be the taxpayer. Whoever is going to do the jobs that the train operators have done has got to be done by somebody else. And frankly, I do not believe that government can do that any cheaper. So the odds are the railway costs are going to go up, not down.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth listening back to the interview if you can, because I thought it was very ideological rather than remotely practical. I mean, we've said, you know, bringing stuff back into the public sector, yeah, okay, you know, probably is actually at this moment in time the sensible thing to do. But nothing will change unless the roles and responsibilities between the key actors are amended and somebody is put in charge now of shadow GBR and empowered to get on and start the process of change, even pre-legislation, right? That's what will make the difference, not just bringing it back into the public sector.
I mean, a couple of her final comments. For the last 30 years, we have had a broken, failed system. Really?
Well, there's two problems with that. First of all, it's evidentially untrue because we saw, literally a near doubling of passenger
800
journeys.
million to 1.7 billion or whatever it was.
Yeah, that doesn't mean to say that everything's been great. We know it's not been great. And we know that, you know, track and train, there are some big issues there. And that's why I'm broadly supportive of the direction of travel. But you can't just say everything in the last 30 years has been awful, especially when your party, Labour, has been in charge for almost half of that. So it was just awful.
And Labour entrenched and deepened what the Conservatives started. And one of her last comments, I thought, betrayed the most appalling ignorance or contempt for the audience in believing this nonsense, was when she was complaining about having to sit on the floor on Great Western trains because there's not enough seats and there's only four cars on the train. So she's going to change that, is she? How? It's just dishonest, isn't it?
It was remarkable. Anyway, we shall be watching with interest. So the other thing that's just worth bearing in mind is that we've now got Royal Assent for the public ownership bill, the Passenger Railways Public Ownership Bill. That's now got Royal Assent. And really that's what's triggered this latest flurry of announcements. The news that South Western Railway will be the first that will come back into public ownership in May next year when their contract expires, and then followed, I think, by C2C and by Greater Anglia. So, I mean, that's the process they always said they would do, really. The real trick, the thing we're really focused on is what comes next with the railways bill, the one that sets up GBR. But the process now is underway, and we're just going to have to keep an eye on that and see how they manage the absorption of all these train companies. I don't think it's going to be anything like as straightforward as they think.
Especially companies like Greater Anglia, which are very successful, because any decline in performance, they're going to have to own that, aren't they?
Indeed.
And it's worth just mentioning, passing, isn't it, that South Western Railway, being the first one to come back into public ownership, was the first one to go out into private operation, I think in 1995. So there's a certain circularity to that, isn't there?
Indeed.
Okay, whilst we're on the subject of government business, Louise Haigh's last act, apart from resigning, of course, was to announce the forthcoming integrated national transport strategy, beginning with a call for ideas. It's in the spirit of a big conversation, to use a buzz expression of the time. And so the public are asked to contribute, and you have until January the 30th to do so. So we'll put a link on the website to enable you to do that more easily. But it's not just for members of the public. The call for ideas has been set up as a series of questions depending on who you are from the following: a frontline worker in the industry, a member of the public, and organisations. However, I sense, Richard, my old chum, that you are not impressed.
Well, look, it's good to consult. There's nothing wrong with consultation, right? But you've got to do it you've got to frame the questions. You've got to set it in context.
Meaningfully.
Yeah, you've got to give a direction of travel, if you like. I mean, for instance, and they haven't done that. So here's some of the questions for frontline workers. As a frontline worker, do you currently experience any challenges with the transport network that affect your ability to carry out your role? Yes, no, or don't know.
How long have you got?
Or, in your opinion, how could the transport network be better joined up?
Yeah.
Blimey, But it's the questions when it comes to the public that are really remarkable. I mean, how about this? How satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the transport network overall? Very satisfied? Satisfied? Neither satisfied nor I could go on. There's some other absolute crackers. How, if at all, would you improve the way decisions are made about the transport network?
We talk about
Seriously.
that every week, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, in your opinion, how best could the transport network be better joined up? And it says select the two most important. It lists about 6, and they're all important, frankly. You should be doing none of them should be something you shouldn't aspire to do. So the very last comment says, have you any other comments? Right? And I said, yeah, I've got another comment. Did the person who wrote this questionnaire mix it up with their teenage child's GCSE urban geography project? Right? And then publish the wrong one. Because if they did, could we actually see the proper one that the serious contribution to developing a national integrated transport strategy? You can't do it like this. It is really, really basic stuff, and I'm really concerned by this. It's a poor piece of work, frankly, in my opinion.
It's naff and it's dangerous, isn't it? Stupid questions. It treats us all like fools.
Well, you're going to get back so much stuff that's incapable of being really disseminated because you haven't framed it. I mean, I've got here, I won't wave it up because some people are listening, but I've got here the West Coast consultation document for the West Coast strategy in 2002. It's 53 pages long. It sets out what the Strategic Rail Authority's view was, and then asks lots of questions on a section-by-section basis
specifically
for people to comment on. It's got maps, it's got graphs, it's got proposed timetables, but it says, look, this is what we think, but what do you think, right? And people did respond to that, and they had a framework within which to respond to. It didn't inhibit them, but it meant that what came back was ordered and structured. This is not ordered and it is not structured.
But apart from all that.
But apart from all that, no. And do you know what's interesting, Nigel? A lot of people welcomed it. I saw lots of comment welcoming it. Did they really? Or do they feel that that's what they're expected to say? And privately they're going, well, privately they're just thinking what I've just said. I don't know. Discuss. Maybe people will comment on that.
To pick up a theme which you visited in our last programme, I think, if this was a school report and you were the teacher, you would be writing crap see me on it.
Yeah, what's to that effect? Yes. Right. There you go.
Moving swiftly on, a couple of episodes ago, we talked about the news that Go-Op Trains, who described themselves as a passenger and worker cooperative preparing open access rail services for Somerset and Wiltshire, in other words, you, Richard, had been granted access rights by the ORR to return weekday and weekend services between Taunton and Weston-super-Mare, Taunton and Westbury, Taunton and Swindon, and Frome and Westbury. As it's on Richard's patch, and we know how much he loves open access and a jolly, so it's all just coming together here, he decided to head over to Taunton to find out a bit more about Go-Op. Take a look.
So we're talking at a time when you've reached something of a milestone. So the Office of Rail and Road have given you access rights to run this service. But they're slightly unusual, aren't they? Because they are subject to, and the subject tos, involve quite a lot of, I suppose, funding, and also they're quite tight on time.
We have secured their approval, and that is a big breakthrough moment for us. But we have also been given something of a challenge there. The first thing that we've absolutely got to do is to demonstrate our financial resilience. And so in the next few weeks, we're going to be launching a share offer with a fixed target for investment, a sum of money that we absolutely have to have secured for our purposes, really, by the spring, although the ORR have given us a full year for that. And then the next thing that we need to do is to make sure that at the very latest, by December 2026, we are actually making use of the capacity on the railway that we've been offered and showing that we can run trains safely and in good order on the network. Now, that's particularly a challenge because one of the conditions is that we must maintain the safety levels at all the level crossings on our route, and that is going to require some minor civil engineering works. And as anyone who's been involved in planning civil engineering works on the railway knows, these things can't be done all that quickly. So that, I think, is probably the critical path to us, is to make sure that the tracks are actually ready for our services in good time.
And in terms of the capital, the money, how much are we talking about that you need to have effectively had committed from this public offering by the spring?
So we're still finalising the share offer document, but I think we're looking for something of the order of £2.5 million to be confident that we've got the resources we need to start operating trains. Now, clearly, once we're operating, like any new service on the railways, we expect to spend 2-3 years losing money, and we're going to need to finance those losses as well. But once we've demonstrated our ability to run trains, I think it's reasonable to expect that loan finance will be more readily available to us, and we'll be able to shift the burden of capitalisation from equity to debt. And so, the total capital requirement for launching this service is going to be of the order of £5 million.
£5 million. I mean, that doesn't sound a huge amount. So that was only part of the interview. Obviously, I just picked one little segment there, Nigel, and the interview with Alex Laurie, the chair of Go-Op, was quite a bit longer. So we're going to be publishing the full interview, the full piece, on our channel in the next few days. And don't forget, plug for members. If you're a member, you get early access to that because it's all edited and ready to go. It's fascinating, First of all, it was a bit of a jolly because it was a nice run down to Taunton, and I've actually got family in Taunton. So
there you go.
I took the opportunity to go and say hello to an aunt and uncle. Haven't seen for a while, so that was nice. However, I'll be honest, I felt that I was expecting something different to what I found. I thought Alex and his colleague David, I thought they were pragmatic. I thought they were organised, and I thought some of the stuff that he talked about around the capital raising ability of cooperatives, I learned a lot, and I thought it was very, very they've got a challenge. I still think raising that money And it can't be anything but optimistic. I mean, it would be foolish not to be. So that was fine.
Can't go into
But
railways with anything other than optimism, can you?
No.
It would crush you otherwise.
It felt grounded optimism. So we'll see. But they're under it's pretty tough timescales to get a lot of stuff organised. But yeah.
So am I hearing the Bowker door creaking open on open access?
No, because I think this one is different. Okay, so
don't beat about the bush. Tell me what you really think, Richard.
Well, I think this one is different. Genuinely, I think this one is different. So there might be a couple of capacity issues in a couple of places. There might be at Taunton in terms of platform occupancy and turn back. Possibly the same at Swindon, sort of crossing over there. So they're both two very busy locations. But it is true that connections at Castlecarry aren't that great. It's true that there's quite a lot of stations along that line where trains go through rather than stop. And the whole focus of this is...
He made that point very well, didn't he?
Yeah, and this is community rail.
If you're passing through, it's great, but if you want to travel within that area, it's really poor.
So this isn't, in my view, a blatant ore-catch raid on a London-based flow in order to basically abstract as much money as possible from somebody else. There is some abstraction. No one's hiding that. But the purpose of this feels, to me, slightly different. But open access generally on very busy, congested routes, in and out of London in particular, where the abstraction is very significant. No, I still have my same.
But it's
same
still
concerns.
putting in a load of stoppers, which are capacity eaters on through routes, isn't it?
Well, there can be, but that's why the timetable analysis has been done.
Okay.
And I say I'm not wholly convinced, but I'm more convinced about this one after the discussion than I was before. How's that?
Well, that's quite something for you, Richard. We'll watch it with considerable interest, and again, we will we'll come back to it. And I mean, I do wish him well. Anybody who wants to use the railway more to carry more people in a better, higher quality way gets my vote. But we just got to work out whether it's possible, financeable, and all the rest of it, don't we?
The timescales are extraordinary. Right, that's the only thing I would just say. Yeah.
All right, good luck. Go up. And now it's time to thank everyone, excuse me again, who's left a super thanks on YouTube for us this week. And you lovely people are Alan Kirkman, Paul Roberts, Marion Bloom, Maxstar 2010, Chris Exley, Bob Walsh, and Richard Porter. Richard, Steph, and I really do appreciate many of you leaving super thanks for us. So thanks very much indeed. And just before we go on to your hot news, Richard, did you see the chap on YouTube this week who left a comment wanting to know if Steph was real or whether she was like Samantha on I'm sorry, I haven't got a clue, who's constantly referred to but doesn't actually exist? Can we make clear Steph absolutely exists and frequently makes her presence felt in a very good way?
Indeed so. In a good way.
In a good way. So, yeah, not like Samantha at all. And you've got some hot news for us, Richard.
Yeah, before I go on to the hot news, just also want to welcome and say thanks to our new silver member, who is David Collison. So thank you, David. You'll be able to see all the members to whom we're very grateful in the end credits of the show, whether you're gold, silver, or bronze. We list them all there. And I should just also add, if you're a gold or silver member, we've got most of them now, but please do remember to send us your postal address so we can send you stuff. My kitchen table is currently covered in boxes with members' mugs, and it would be great to be able to get all of those out if I can. Now, the hot news...
Do you want a fanfare?
Yeah, go on then. That was all right. Well, I'm sorry about that, everybody. So the hot news is that on Tuesday, the 10th of December, so that's next week, we are going to do something new and exciting. At 7 p.m. for gold and silver members, we're going to be holding a live no safety net Q&A discussion. Now, we're not absolutely sure which platform we're going to run that on yet, because we're very conscious that we've got some who listen on YouTube, some who listen on Spotify and so on. So we're just working that out. But we will put details of it and the link to it on the sort of the members area and the community tab, that kind of stuff, so that you know where it is. So don't worry about that. But it is going to be, look out for it, because it's Tuesday, 10th of December, 7 p.m, live Q&A with Nige and Richard. How about that?
Well, it's your comment about a safety net seems pertinent, doesn't it? Let's we've you to a far higher standard than me, Richard, but we've both played in bands on stage, and there's always that sense of a bit of adrenaline as you step out, even when it's something that you're familiar with doing, and we're not with this. So there's definitely going to be the performance gene is going to be called on, isn't it?
Absolutely. That'd be fun. I'll tell you a funny story very quickly. I did a gig once. It's a long time ago. And the bass player was relatively new to this particular band.
Yeah.
And there was one track we were slightly concerned about. We did it, and he came over at sort of the end whilst the singer was kind of queuing up the next song. He says, well, that went all right, didn't it? I said, yeah, it was great. Next time, let's play it all in the same key.
No, he wasn't.
It was absolutely sensational. Yeah, that was he was slightly deflated, but never mind.
The usual cry at moments like that is it's just part of the arrangement.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I bet you delivered it with panache as well. Poor bugger, I bet he was felt. We went back, and he only had 4 strings to start with. Mind you, maybe it was a 5-string bass, but we're not getting to that. And now it's time for this week's Railway News Roundup. HS2 has revealed that the 2 giant tunnel boring machines, TBMs, that will tunnel between Old Oak Common and London Euston have started being assembled. They're called Madeline and Karen, as the 1,250-ton TBMs have been named, ready for digging the final 4.5 miles of underground high-speed railway into the heart of London, and hooray for that. Approval was given by Chancellor Rachel Reeves in the budget for the tunnelling to begin, which is expected to take around 18 months. And we are really good at that tunnelling now, aren't we, after all the experience with Crossrail and what have you? The TBMs were unveiled on the same day as new HS2 CEO Mark Wilde took up his post, and the event was attended by Rail Minister Lord Hendy. It's a tradition that TBMs are given historical female names. So Karen is named after Karen Harrison, the first female train driver in the UK who was based at Old Oak Common Depot. I did not know that. And Madeline, not after your wife, Richard, but after Madeline Nobbs, the former president of the Women's Engineering Society. And of course, final plans for the station haven't yet been agreed, or indeed any plans. So we have approval for a tunnel to Euston, but no fixed idea yet as to what happened when a train pops to the surface at the end of the tunnel. I did see a suggestion on Twitter this week that with an aerial shot of the site that said we should just flatten the lot and start again. And I have to say, it's an idea that's not without merit.
No, indeed not. I'm sure it'll get sorted. Every confidence. Less good news at Northern. I'm afraid we did say a couple of weeks ago that Northern had reached an agreement with the RMT over rest day working for its conductors in the Northwest. It was only an interim agreement for 4 months, but it was, we thought, at least an agreement nonetheless. Since then, it's been put to the union's members, and they have rejected it, meaning that Northern has had to propose amending its Sunday timetable, and is advising passengers in the Northwest to expect cancellations on Sundays and over the Christmas period.
Doesn't public ownership put an end to all these problems?
Oh, yeah, no, so that fixes everything, doesn't it? Yeah, I forgot about that, sorry. Northern says that the pay offer would have meant conductors doubling the money they get for Sundays.
Wow.
Neither party is saying any more at this stage, other than Northern clearly disappointed that the offer was rejected, especially since they said that the talks had been constructive, and they were clearly hopeful at the time that members would accept the offer, but they haven't. So sadly, it's back to the drawing board.
And for the poor passengers in Northern, the misery will continue. But a little bit of good news from Northern and TransPennine Express, though. They've joined forces to offer a 50% discount on the regular price of a child ticket between certain destinations to help students commute to school. The U16 education season ticket scheme has run for several years on Northern services, but it's now been extended to TPE as well. So that's a good thing.
Indeed. Now, here's another, I suppose it's a good thing, but it's been a little while coming. But nonetheless, South Western Railway has celebrated the rollout of its new Arterio fleet by naming one of their trains the Nighthawk. Bit of sporting trivia for you here, Nigel. I know how much you are a sports aficionado. You are. England cricketing legend Stuart Broad, CBE, attended the celebration at London Waterloo last week, which was a short trip from Vauxhall, where he took the final wicket in his final test match at the Oval Cricket Ground.
Okay.
There you go. South Western Railway also named Arterio's jockey, Red Rose, that made me happy anyway, Ace and Thames Racer in honour of sporting links with other stations on its network. So there are now 5 Arterios in service, serving the routes to Windsor and Eton, Riverside and also Shepperton. And then the new fleet's going to serve other stations on the network over the next 6 months. I mean, it's £1 billion order, this. The 10-car trains will carry more than 50% more passengers than the 8-car Class 455s. They replace, and I've been on one. I've stood inside it and they are impressive bits of kit.
And here's a fun one to end the roundup with. 2 HST power cars from Network Rail's new measurement train, NMT, have become the first older generation locomotives to participate in mainline digital signalling testing on the East Coast. They've both been fitted with ETCS, European Train Control System, equipment, and they took part in testing between Welling Garden City and Hitchin. And it's all part of the £1.4 billion East Coast digital programme. Great to see a bit of British rail heritage involved in the testing of the very latest equipment. Hey, Richard?
No, it's nice. It's nice to see the baton being handed over. I think that's good.
Indeed, and of course we saw a Deltic being fitted with it at LSL a while ago, didn't we?
Indeed.
And that's the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send us any snippets of news from you, from around you, or from further away, please drop us an email at news@greensignals.org. Can't promise to read them all out, but if we use yours, we'll give you a credit. So let us move on, and I'm trying to contain my excitement.
Is that right? It means it must be time for the quiz.
It is.
It is. Last week's question was apparently very easy, according to the dozens of people who
even I knew the answer to this one.
Even you knew. I didn't realise it was that easy.
Wow. Cheeky it is saying something.
So the question was, what took place between 1848 and 1880 that ultimately proved timely for the railway? Now, if you just said the creation of standard time, I'm afraid we didn't think that was kind of detailed enough. It's kind of right, but the people who said something close to the following, they really nailed it.
They went into at.
Well, they explained it. So on the 22nd of December 1847, right, it was recommended by the Railway Clearinghouse that all railway companies should adopt Greenwich time, London time. And so by January 1848, I think in that year's Bradshaw, this had generally been done. Not absolutely everywhere, but generally. And over the next few years, the rest of the country kind of followed the railways. It then actually took till 1880, the second date, for it to become legal for the whole of Great Britain that Greenwich Mean Time was to be used by an Act of Parliament, the Statutes Definition of Time Act 1880. So if you knew what had taken place in those 2 years, then you did really, really well. We got loads of answers that were correct. The winner, randomly chosen, was Michael Scarisbury. So well done, Michael. Send us an email again, if you could, to quiz@greensignals.org, and we will send your mug out to you. So this week's quiz, which is a listener question from, did I say reader?
You did.
I meant, listener. Obviously, right. I'm having one of those moments.
I tried to say just from a fellow Green Signaler or our
well, that'll do, because that is also absolutely true. Anyway, John Abberton who enjoyed watching our piece about the GWR battery train on the Greenford branch that we did a few weeks ago. So this is John's question. Thank you, John. Name another railway line in the UK that has trains which are exclusively battery operated for passenger services. Okay. Now, you might think that's an easy one. If you do, well, great. I can think of possibly two, actually, that I think could be correct answers. But anyway, if you think you know, answers please to quiz@greensignals.org by midday on Saturday, December the 7th. And we'll put all the correct answers into the hat and pick one out at random.
Jolly good. I do enjoy the quiz Mickey taking apart. There's all sorts of interesting things bubble to the surface, don't they?
Indeed so, yeah.
Little bit of good news to end on now, and sent to us by listener Paul Roberts. 27 redundant Class 175 DMUs from Transport for Wales will be moving to GWR. Great Western intends to lease the 16 3-car and 11 2-car sets from Angel Trains from May 2025 on Devon and Cornwall routes, potentially until 2032. The DMUs have been in store since TfW introduced enough Class 197s into their fleet in 2023. Great to see the units getting a new lease of life rather than sitting in storage, giving meaning to the old railway term cascade there, I think, Richard.
Yeah, I like these units, actually. Were they Caradia or Caradia, something like that?
I think,
yeah, something like that. They used to run on the line from, they used to run the Manchester Cardiff, I think, didn't they? Because I know you used to catch them from down to Hereford. I quite like these units. So, but as you say, it's great to see units with plenty of life left now actually being gainfully employed. They're good.
Doing what they were built for. And sadly,
Indeed.
That's all we've got time for this week. So thanks so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, or if you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel if you're a YouTuber. It really helps us. And if you really want to support us and be part of the Green Signals family more generally, find out about membership on either YouTube or Patreon, where you get all sorts of cool stuff first or exclusively. And we've got all sorts of good stuff coming. But most importantly, do join us again next week for this show, which will always be free. So we'll see you then. Meanwhile, it's goodbye from me, and
it's goodbye from me.
Have a great week.